they made me, I had to go to log in on my normal account for me, and then I had to make it from that. I always thought that you can make it separately. Maybe you can.
No, they're connected on.
But they're connected. Okay. So anyway, so I'm going through the internet and I find an article that I want to share on my business account, and I hit the Facebook logo, and it always brings me to my personal login, and it wants to share it on my personal account. How do I get it to do that on there? Yeah, whatever.
I'll show you after.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Couple hive tools. Couple hive tools, a hat, honey, and a shirt of your choice.
Do you want me to come help you?
One of our shirts of choice. Out there we have different sizes, so we won't give you a small if you need an extra large. We won't give an extra large if you're small. So you can't get what you need or what you want. So if you are interested in getting raffle tickets, they have them outside the door. You can pick those up. We got a list going around. You got your list going around for mentors. Okay, there's a list going around for mentors or mentees. You can help either way. Get on the list, let us know. We also are looking for some volunteers for Saturday and Sunday for Green Thumb Festival. It's this weekend, folks.
That was really fun. I enjoyed it.
Any other new people? Yeah.
Where's
The
Linda?
Green Thumb Festival.
Okay, Linda has the sign-up sheet as of this morning. So that is the link we've been sharing on Facebook and on the website. There are some names that have already been filled out. There are blank spots. We really need help. We were short on the last event we did a few weekends ago. And it's very important that these events run smoothly, that we get a lot of help, because these events help us sell the honey, which helps put the money back into the organization, which allows us to continue doing the things that we do. So
Anybody else new want to sign up?
The better. And we all always appreciate the folks that actually came and helped 2 weeks ago. I don't know, raise your hand. I think Craig, Jennifer.
I don't get you up, it's someone else.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yay! I can hear.
Okay. Cut version 2. So we have an event this weekend called Green Thumb. It's Saturday and Sunday. It's from 8 to 4. We do need volunteers still. Linda, she's walking around here. She's got the sign-in sheet. Some spots have been filled, but we have a lot of empty spaces. If you guys can take time this weekend and show up, even if it's for a couple hours or an hour, we really would like your help selling honey, helping with brochures and any questions. People have a lot of questions when they come to these events, and I think this is a really great opportunity for us to share what we know. Also, thank you to the people who showed up 2 weekends ago for Earth Day. We were a little short-handed. We did manage to, what was it, Jennifer, about $400 worth of sales. And these events help put money back into the club so we can continue to do things like this. So your help is much appreciated. And
Anybody else?
All right, how's I will tell you that the volunteers are looking for it. They don't need somebody who's sold honey all their life. They just need some warm bodies. Just giving the little test spoons out with honey, helping around the booth. There'll be a few people there that are real knowledgeable, know, and you'll pick it up real quick. It ain't hard. If I can do it, it ain't hard. So if you have some time and can spare it, please come out and help us. We're kind of split then because I'll be at the D-Yard Saturday working with the newbies and people that come out to the D-Yard. So we got a lot going on this weekend, but we can use some help. Like I said, we are going to be at the apiary Saturday morning, probably about 9 o'clock. On the back side here, there'll be a sign out by the road. And we will be at Great Bay. Jim will be out there Wednesday morning around 10 o'clock. So if you can't make it Saturday at 9 a.m., out by Great Bay, which is just down the road from the landfill by Great Bay Distributors. They'll have a day in the yard there, and you'll have the veils and gloves and everything just like we have here. So come dressed kind of appropriately, closed shoes, long pants, long sleeves if you got them. We'll have veils and gloves and all that. Oh, one more thing I want to announce about our webmaster. I get you to take a stand real quick, just not to embarrass you, but she's redesigned our web page, and I believe it'll be shortly we'll be rolling it out. I don't think it's going to be very long because it's looking really good. We're updating and tweaking and changing some things. So if you haven't been on it in a while, keep going on every couple times a week and checking it and see what you think. Because it is going to change. I think it's a bunch of great changes for the better. And if you have any thoughts, let us know. If they're bad thoughts, keep them to yourself. There's always ways to do things better. If we can set something up better, let us know. We're always interested in improving and changing. So, without any further ado, like I said, the raffle's ready. Whenever y'all want to grab on some of that. Jim, are you still here, or where do you? You want to make your way up here and. So what Jim's talking about doing tonight, we're going to do a little cutout on Saturday. So he's going to do a trap out. We're going to do a cutout. We're going to talk about all three. So we'll be able to show you one of what he's trying to do, what he's trying to tell you. So.
I have more props, but I didn't bring them with me because a friend of mine has borrowed them. And so my feedback is no longer not here tonight. We went to a beer room. Everybody hear me? Or I need to
Yeah, you have to
hold it in front of you. All right, hear me now. We've been doing these about 10 years, I think. We started over at University of South Florida Botanical Gardens. At the time, I think Gary, the guy that started the whole course, had one hive there. Our first time there was in, I think, January. It was like 50 degrees or maybe colder. He opened the hive anyway because he had to show us. We all got stung. I thought my wife was done. I thought she would walk away and never do it again. Stopped at the drugstore, got some Benadryl. Oh, well, I guess that's it, right? She said, no, we're coming back. So we've been doing this for about 10 years. We supervise about 25 hives at the gardens, and then we have around 35 or 40 hives of our own up in Dunedin. We did have some hives at the house, but right now there's only one there. But a lot of what we do is removals. We've sort of slowed down this year because of health issues, and I've got somebody I'm trained to do some of the others. We started off, I just put an ad in Craigslist. If you ever want to get a lot of calls about bees, put an ad in Craigslist. I didn't tell my wife. So we had a drink already, we're sitting at the dinner table eating dinner, my phone rings. I'm telling you, I get the address. She says, what is that all about? I said, we're going to go to the swarm. So our very first swarm was after dark on a windowsill. I read everywhere that swarms are not aggressive, that they're easy to handle. I took a box, I walked up to the windowsill, brushed the bees in the box, and I was doing great. Until I stumbled in a hole. I don't think I've ever been stung so many times in my life. Probably at least 40 or 50 stings. She, of course, was wearing a bee suit. She had no problem. She walked over, picked it up, collected it, knocked the bees off me, and I went back and sat down in the car. So anyway, first of all, if you've been doing anything with beekeeping for about 4 hours, you know that there's 100 different opinions on how anything works. So if I tell you one thing, do not go and argue with somebody else and say, that's what Jim said, because somebody else has a different way of doing it. Second of all, if you're doing removals, you want to make sure you have a license, you're a licensed beekeeper, or that you're a licensed pest control exterminator. If you're not, the state will fine you. So that means if you want to get started in bees and you go out and collect a swarm, or you want to go out and do a removal, you should be a registered beekeeper. And probably get a swarm that's probably not going to give you grief. The DAX inspector, that's the Department of Agriculture, happens to be driving down the street, see somebody working on bees up under cutting out a hole in the garage, he can stop and he can fine you. The fines start at about $500 and they go up. So if you're going to do bee removals, you need to either be licensed pest control or you need to be a licensed beekeeper. The second thing is, at least in Pinellas County, they are cracking down on unlicensed contractors. So you can open a wall, no problem. But you can't repair the wall unless you're a contractor. So what we tell our customers is, look, we'll get the bees out, we'll have them over comb out, but it's your job to repair the wall. We won't do it. And I see people doing it all the time, and I know that people are going to get fined and get caught. Second, the last thing is, you're not allowed as a beekeeper to do any other except remove. If you're in your own house, you can go out and catch a swarm of wasps if you want. You put your bee suit on, your yellow jackets. But you cannot do that to anybody else's property. I can't go to Johnny's house and put my bee suit on and remove a hive of hornets or yellow jackets without being in violation of the law. All we're allowed to do as beekeepers is live removals. That means I can't even show up with a can of wasp spray and kill them. The only thing I'm allowed to use chemical-wise is a jar of soap and water, or a bucket of soap. Alright, so let's talk about swarms first of all, since that's in the earlier stuff. Everybody still hear me, or am I losing this thing? Up until we started beekeeping, I think I'd seen 2 swarms in my whole life. Never occurred to me that they occur as often as they do. Since I've been a beekeeper, I probably see 30, 40 swarms a year. Some of mine, which is not good, but they're still mine. A lot come because I have bees around, I have smell-like bees, and they come and visit my used boxes that are stored. They get in my trees. So swarms, to get a swarm, you need to have something that smells like bees. You can use some stuff you can buy commercial called Swarm Commander. What we use is that we have all the old weeds that we replace. We put the jar of alcohol and just wash them. And we'll take a cotton ball, put it up on a frame, and stick the box up as high as we can, because swarms do like to collect up high. They don't like going down low. So if you see swarms, you can usually see them up high. You probably see them down on the ground. Although that happens sometimes. If you've got used equipment, if you've got comb that's been built out, bait the hive with that. That's an excellent thing. You can use lemongrass oil. You can buy that at any of these weird stores where they sell the different perfumes and stuff. Just a few drops. You don't want to use a lot. So you can get swarms, just set stuff out. If you're in an area where there's bees, if you go out in your yard and you see lots of bees, even though you don't have beehives, you know there's a beehive nearby, because bees don't normally forage very far away. They can forage for, I think the books say 8 miles, probably about 200 yards is what they normally forage. They don't usually go looking unless they're really desperate for food. So if you see bees in your yard, that means there's a hive nearby, set up a swarm trap. If you don't see the bees, you're wasting your time. When we get a call, I usually have junk in my trunk. I usually have a hive body, I have a screen bottom board, I have ratchet straps, I have a top. I carry my bee suit just about everywhere. I usually have gloves, I have a bee brush, and I usually have a spray bottle of sugar water. So if I get a call and I'm not in the middle of something else, like still at work, or even if I'm at work, a lot of times I'll sneak out. I'll show up real quick. The swarms don't usually stay around. Swarms usually show up maybe for a day or sometimes less. Once in a while you'll have a swarm stay a day or two. Usually swarms come, we send out scouts, they look for a new place to live, and move. So you gotta, if you're looking for swarms, you gotta get there. You can't say, well, I'll come tomorrow or the next day, or I can't get off till Saturday. It's reviewed as gone. So when you show up for a swarm, usually I ask, before I even go, I ask the customer, how high are they? Of course, the first thing they always tell you is, well, it's just about 6 feet high. Yeah, the last time somebody actually had a hive with a swarm that was 6 feet high, that was probably in diapers. Usually swarms are up where you can't reach them. So usually, a lot of times I carry a ladder with me, sometimes I don't, but I just dump it out for some reason. So I'll ask the customer if he's got a ladder. You're not going to be a ladder, they're only a few feet up. Once in a while, somebody actually tells me the truth. But generally, they're going to be hanging on a branch up here, or maybe a branch even higher up. I'm not real good about climbing ladders anymore. I'm old, I got bad knees. So if they're real high, I just tell them, sorry, I'll get somebody else. But if you got a swarm, the easiest thing is take your rocks and stick up under the swarm, wearing at least a veil, and knock the bees or brush the bees into the rock. These swarms are generally pretty docile. But if you do something stupid, you squash a couple of bees, or you really knock a branch loose, because a lot of bees are going to be flying and some of them are going to sting. So no matter what people say about how nice swarms are, it's not always true. What else can I tell you about swarms? That's about the only time I don't charge anybody for swarm removal, because I figured, 10 to 15 minutes going to get the swarm, it's pretty much really 3 bees. But the rest of the time, when somebody tells me, well, and I put them a price, I say, well, the bees are free. I'll tell you what, I'll leave the box, you put the bees in, and I'll come back. Then I got free bees. Otherwise, I'm going to charge you for getting the bees out. So let's talk about different kinds of swarms. A hive swarms, normally what happens is the original queen and a bunch of the workers, usually sort of younger middle-aged foragers, take off. They go somewhere for a short period of time, usually not too far, maybe 100 feet, 150 feet, and they hang out and send out scouts. A lot of times, the book says that the first queen hatches out is going to kill the other queens that haven't hatched yet. That's not true. They might, if you have a hive that's swarming, a lot of times they'll have 10, 15, even sometimes 20 or more queen cells. And usually not all in the same frames, they're usually on different frames. So the first queen out, she does what they call piping. If you've ever heard it, you'll recognize it. See, I think what that basically is a challenge. It says, I'm hatched, I'll come kick your ass, or you can come kick mine. And what happens, they pipe back and forth, and they fight. But if the bees are on different frames, a lot of times the voice is so low that if one queen will be up on this frame, one queen will be up on this frame, either they don't hear each other or they don't find each other. What happens then is they'll get a group of workers around them, and they'll have what they call an after swarm or secondary swarm. And that's a virgin queen takes off with a bunch of workers. And if you have enough after swarms, you can decimate the hive so bad that the hive won't survive. Just they take all the bees out and leave. They got all this brood, the whole brood that's capped, and that's hatching out, but the rest of the bees are gone. So avoiding swarms is, having swarms for yourself is a good thing to do if you know those bees. Getting other people's swarms is a good thing if you're getting their bees. Like I said, most of the time they're non-independent, they're not aggressive. I normally find that if it's a big swarm, football size or maybe even a bit bigger, that's usually a primary swarm. You can almost be sure that there's a little queen in there. If you get little swarms like baseball size, even smaller sometimes, I've had them. Yeah, baseball, softball size, those are usually virgin queens, and your odds are not real good. Because that queen, after you get them in a hive, they still got a good comb. That queen has to go out and mate, she has to come back and lay, and these are already like 4-week-old, 3.5, 4-week-old bees that are with her, and they're only going to lose 6 or 7 weeks. So before she ever really starts laying, most of those bees are going to be dead. So secondary swarms, it's better just to combine them with, especially the queen, to combine them with one hive. when I get a swarm, it usually doesn't have any food, doesn't have any comb. So the first thing I always do is I give it a frame of honey. I'll take it up the apiary, I'll put a frame of honey out, one of my hives. And they also don't really have anything to anchor it yet. They've got it clean, but they haven't got any brood or anything. So there's no reason for them to stay there if they really don't like the facilities. And maybe the bathroom needs to be repainted or whatever. A lot of times, if you just have a swarm in a box, a lot of times they won't stay. It's a lot like Johnny was talking about packages. Packages have a notoriously problem with leaving, absconding as they were. So I've also given them a frame that's got brood on it. And I usually give them a frame that's got eggs, young larvae, and older larvae. So that if, for instance, I have a queen in there that's no good, or a virgin queen that's not going to make it, sometimes they'll make it a queen and start things up. Either way, give them brood and honey will anchor them, and the odds are about 80% will stay. Whereas if you just throw a swarm in a box, I'd say the odds are probably 20–25%. So you lose about out of four swarms, you probably lose all of the money unless you do something about it. The other thing, if you've got the swarms where you're close to your house, you can close them up for a couple of days and put feeders on. But my apiary is 30 minutes, 35 minutes away, and there's just no way I'm going to drive back and forth to the apiary every day to refill feeders. So let's talk about some other things now. My favorite method of getting bees is what's called cutouts. People will get bees under shed floors. They get bees in their soffits. Sometimes they'll get bees in attics and things. Generally, the bees look for enclosed space. So soffits are a real popular item. They're high. Usually in Florida, soffits don't last forever. They can get a lot. So you get little holes in them, or mice or rats chew holes in them. And it makes a nice access for the bees. And the other thing is in Florida, they don't insulate soffits. So it's a nice open space. So what will happen is you get a swarm moves in, people aren't really, they don't notice. You know, it's like the bees move in at 9 o'clock in the morning while they're at work. They don't get real active for a few days. The first day on the weekend, they might notice them. Then they go away, and they wait. And usually we can call them in there for several weeks or several months. So you get a shed. People buy all these sheds and they put them up on pieces of concrete and stuff so that they know the floor doesn't rot, and they leave gaps along the edges. The bees can go right up under there and make a nice hive. We've had bees in barbecue grills. I did one last year with bees under the hood of a minivan that had broken down, and when the guys finally got around to fixing the van, they opened the hood and got the crap some out of it. So any place that's got enough volume, usually somewhere in the 5 to 10 gallon range, is a good place to find bees. They'll move in almost anything. So like I say, soffits, floors, walls, a lot of old houses around. And the cable guys are my favorites. You got WOW, you get tired of WOW, you call up Spectrum or one of the other guys. They don't come out and use the same hole. They pull the WOW's guys wire out, they throw it on the ground, they drill another hole. But they don't do that hole, so now you got a nice entrance for bees. Or if you got wooden siding, you got knots and stuff, over 20, 40, 50 years, knots fall out, they're open. And anything that gives you a nice opening, especially like that, great place for bees. So the first thing we do when we get to, well, the first thing is I go out and I look at the job, and I tell people what to expect. I tell them how much I'm going to charge them, and I ask, and everybody's got different pricing idea. Like Nancy Mariposa, who's in Maine right now, she charges a fortune, and I can't get a price like that. It hurts me. But I charge usually about $150 an hour when I estimate a job. So most jobs take between 2 and 3 hours. So I'm going to quote somewhere around $250 to $350. And so a lot of times I'll quote $350, and if it doesn't take a tremendous long time, I might knock our price down a little bit. But then other times I've quoted jobs for $350 and it's taking me $750 at the time. So I'm not always real generous, but I always try to be try to be fair. The main thing is, if you don't do a written contract, which I'm not very good about, you should explain to the customer over and over and over again exactly what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, and what they should expect. I'm the PR guy. When you go out to do a removal, I'm the one that talks to the customer the whole time. I'm just standing out watching this. My wife's down in the shed, sweating like a pig, cutting out the beehive. And while she's doing that, I'm standing out talking to the customer. Eventually, I actually do some work. But in the meantime, she's very well trained. She beats me on a regular basis, though. So we'll start by, first thing we start with is we have a bag. You know what a regular shop bag looks like. Take a beehive box, and I wish I had brought it, but unfortunately, when I say it's right, I brought it. We have a way of closing the bottom, which in my particular case, I do a lot of woodwork. So I put a groove all the way around, I put a piece of 3/8 inch, 3/16 plexiglass, again, so it slides in and acts as a barrier. So that seals the bottom. And then I put a piece of number 8 hardware cloth. This is number 8 hardware cloth here, just inside the top. And I have another piece that slides in on the top. So when I have both pieces of plexiglass slid in, I have a relatively tight vacuum seal. So I have a way of, and then I have an inlet where I put my hose up where I suck the bees up. And I have another one where I hook my vacuum up. Of course, you have to keep the bees from being sucked back into the vacuum. So there's a screen over that opening. So now I have a box that I can suck the bees into. I have a box that I can release the bees later from. So the first thing we always do is we hook up the vacuum. Before we put our bee suits on, before we do anything else, we hook up the vacuum, and the vacuum's on. And it stays on the whole time. Now, some people say, well, that's sort of dumb, but a vacuum is a safety device. If you start working on a hive, it may turn out to be sweet. They may invite you in for tea. But just as likely, they're going to want to kick your butt. And especially around here where we have a small to medium number of African bees, you'll go to work on a hive. You can stand in a hive and you say, wow, these bees are nice. And pet the bees, no problem. But as soon as you start tearing a hole in that wall, they become the devils from hell. And they'll come pouring out. But the ones that attack are always the foragers. It's not the nice nurse bees inside. It's not the queen. It's the guys that have already been outside. And they come boiling out and they're ready for you. So if you got the vacuum going, it does two things. One is it's sucking out all the pheromone out of the air. So that attack pheromone that smells like bananas mixed with acetone doesn't have a chance to accumulate. You don't have all these bees getting higher and higher on this pheromone. The second thing is because you're sucking all these foragers into the vacuum, you very quickly remove the attacking force. So that does two things. One is it makes it easier for us, and two is almost every time we do a job, there's always a few Jothos around. Everybody know what Jothos are? They're just friendly observers, unless you happen to see something orange. Stanley Kubrick's. There are other terms. Anyway, vacuum goes on first. When we're doing the vacuuming, we always try to run the shortest extension cord, usually no more than 50 feet, because the further out your cord goes, even though the vacuum will run, it seems to lose its suction. So we always try to have electric outlets close by. So the vacuum goes on, we get our bee suits on, and we start. And the first thing, of course, is locating the bees. You can see the bees coming in and out of the hole, but that doesn't mean the bees are right behind that hole. So the first thing you do is locate the bees. A lot of times we'll take a hole saw, a small hole saw, and an electric drill, and we'll drill a hole. And if you don't get bees coming out, we'll go somewhere else. We may drill 7 or 8 holes before we figure out where the bees are. And sometimes we may drill more holes than that. We worked under a trailer one time, and we were ready to give up. We'd spend an hour and a half looking for bees. I pulled half the bottom of this trailer out, it was the cardboard stuff they put on the trailer, never found a bee. And then suddenly I found the bees. So after we locate them, we usually try to open up the space so that we can see the whole hive. There's two reasons for that. One is we want to know how much work you're going to actually have. The other thing is, because you can see the whole comb, now you're not going to have bees running off into places to hide, like the queen. So usually I always start the furthest away from you, and we start working our way back. We'll vacuum any loose bees up, and we'll start cutting comb out. The comb usually on the outside edges is either old comb that's not in use, and they work, like in the spring when the hive's not expanded yet, or it's comb with honey and pollen in it. Almost never have brood on the outer edges. So that comb goes in a bucket. And if we get much of it, we put covers on it so we don't attract more bees. As we work our way in, we'll begin eventually we'll begin to get combs with a lot of brood or a lot of bees on it. What'll happen is the light will take the kind of bees off. And I'll have a bunch of frames in the foundation. And we bring both deep and medium frames depending on what we're working on. Usually walls and sheds, we use medium frames because the comb is not going to be very deep. You can take rubber bands, I'll have a bunch of rubber bands around the comb, and she cuts the comb off, and I'll fit it to make sure it's going to fit right. And we'll stick the comb in those frames with little bands, and then they go in the box, which will be sitting right next to us. And we may do that for 15 or 20 minutes, 30 minutes, until we have almost all the brood comb. And we try to avoid getting honey, because if you get honey, and it cools on the brood comb, it kills them. So we'll have the honey in a separate bucket. There'll be a little bit of honey a lot of times around the comb, but we're mostly looking to get the brood. If all possible, we try to get the queens without using the vacuum. So a lot of times, you're already hot, you're sweaty, your glasses are gummed up, you got bee spit all over you. A lot of times we won't see the queen, but as soon as we put the queen in the box, you'll usually notice a big change in the way the bees are behaving. We suddenly see bees that were just flying around and start diving into the box. As soon as you see that, you say, wow, I got a queen in there, I know I do. So at that time, we start finishing up. We finish cutting the comb off, we'll start back, we'll vacuum up any loose bees that we can, and then the basic idea now is if we're working close at home and the customer's location where the bees are is a location where it's safe to leave the hive for a few hours, we'll leave it sitting there until dark and come back. Because then all the bees will be in the hive. If it's a place with a lot of activity, or the customer doesn't want us to leave it there, or for any number of reasons, we'll bring that hive back, go to the apiary, and the bee vac. Now remember, it's got wire on one side. As soon as we're ready to turn the vacuum off, we pull the cover off the wire so the bees can breathe. We kill bees before we figure this out. So we pull that wire off. The box goes in the back seat. The bees in the hive go in the back seat. Air conditioning. We drink a bunch of water. We drive up the bee. The bee box, the bee vacuum, we turn it over. So now what we've got between us and the bees is this piece of plexiglass. Then we'll set the box on top of that, put a cover on it, and slide the other cover on it. Now the bees that are in the vacuum box can go up into the comb. And usually they'll stay. Once in a while we'll mistake, we might get the queen or we'll kill the queen, and sometimes they won't stay. Usually the other thing we usually do is we'll give that hive a frame, an established hive with eggs and brood on it. So if for some reason we do actually kill the queen, they've got a way of making the new queen. It's pretty much doing a cutout. Anybody have questions on the cutouts? Usually what we do is we'll scrape everything we can, and then we'll take soapy, like Dawn dishwashing soap, because that's pretty good about removing a lot of stuff. We'll scrub it down a little bit. You can sometimes take a wire brush and brush it off. But what we tell the customers is, okay, leave it open for 3 or 4 days. What you're going to have is every bee in the neighborhood is going to come around to look for the spilled honey and stuff. But once the bees quit coming around, you need to close it up right away, because no matter what we do, that's always going to become an attractant later on. So like we're doing a soffit or a wall, we tell them, you're going to make them pairs. Don't just slap some more boards out there. Fill that thing up with insulation. Use the pink fiberglass insulation or something like that. Because what happens when a scout comes out looking for a place to make it live, they find a weigh in. Well, they go in and they start measuring things, and it's only a couple inches. They're not going to try to make that go high. If they walk into a mansion, and this thing is, 10-gallon space, they're going to say, well, this smells like bees. It's like bees have been here before. It must be a good place. And we'll go get the food and bring it in. So you've got to close, not only close it up, but you've got to make sure you fill up the space. If you don't, then you get another customer, the same customer next year. We did one out on Davis Island. We called it the Derrick Mansion. Got a call, went out there, looked at it, gave it that price. I could barely get him to come out of the house and show me where the bees were. Had blue tarp all over the roof. But he had a Mercedes and a brand new Jeep in the garage. So he points to the spot on the peak of the second floor. So we get the ladder out, we get up there, and Becky takes the sawzall and opens this thing up. And it had been there for a long time. It was probably 4 feet long and 2 or 3 feet high, and it was a huge high. So we ended up filling like 6 5-gallon buckets up to the cone. And then of those 5-gallon buckets, there were 4 of them for one. So we made a lot of money just from this cutout. So anyway, we told the guy, the standard, leave it open for a couple of days and get it repaired. Well, the next spring, I get a call, and I think his name was Alex, I believe. This is Alex's mother. You remember Alex from last year? This is on Davis Island? Yes, ma'am. Yes, I remember. That stupid chain of expletives didn't do a damn thing. He didn't repair the house and the bees were back. House would be. So we charged him double. I think Mama made him fix it. Okay. I say cutouts are my favorite. A lot of times you can't do a cutout. You get a guy with a concrete block wall or stucco, and they don't want to have to make a repair, and I don't want to have to cut through concrete block. So what you do with a concrete wall or any place where the customer doesn't want to open the wall up, or like statues sometimes. We've done a couple. We did one of those last year where the whole statue was hollow with the bees in it. They didn't want to break the statue. So we did what they call a trap out. A trap out's a little different. The bees are in the wall. The bees have made comb in there. They're happily raised the brood. They've stored honey in there. So they're not interested in weaving. So the first thing you got to do is figure out where all the doors are. A lot of times there'll be more than one entrance in the hive, and so the first thing is to pull around and plug up everything except for when you're working. And then you got to wait and see if you're going to have any misses on it. So in the meantime, what we do is we make a cone out of every part of the pod. I've seen them made out of window screen. Almost anything that's porous. You don't want to use like a regular funnel, because with a funnel, the bees just walk around until they find the entrance and go back in. With a screen, they can see that there's the door, but they can't figure out how to get into it. So it's a lot like a crab trap or a fish trap. They can get in, but they can't figure out how to get out. So the cone needs to cover the hole where the bees are coming out, and it needs to be narrow enough that it only allows a bee or two at a time to go out. So that's we usually use like a lead pencil or that ball pen on this end to make sure it's the right size. The other thing we try to do is we try to make it pointing up just a little bit. And the reason for that is if bees die on the way out and it's pointing down, they tend to vibrate the way down and they plug up the door. And the other bees can't get out. So if it points up a little bit, the bees tend to roll back in the other way. So we put that cone up and we make sure that we've got a good seal. A lot of times we use caulk or even foam rubber, and then attach this with screws or bolts so that we have a good closure. Then the next thing is we wait. We wait at least a day or two, we come back. And if the bees are all on the outside, we have bees coming in on the outside, we don't see bees coming anywhere else, then we know that we're ready to go. So the next thing we do we put a nook or a full hive body, if it's a bee's been there a long time, as close to this thing as we can. And even sometimes we've even put a hole in the nook and stuff. They do this in the nook. But again, you don't want to have it where the bees can figure out how to get back in, so it's easy to stick in the nook without motion. You just put it around the edge of the side of the nook. The bees walk down the nook and go back on. So you want to make sure that they have, that they can't figure out how to get back in. So in that nook, we put a frame of eggs and larvae. You always got to have, it can be day-old larvae, it can be eggs. It can't be much older day-olds, because what you're going to do, those bees are going to go back in there because they're not close enough for the pheromone queen to let them know that they have a queen. They're going to start building them. They're going to start making queen cells. Of course, you also put a frame into the honey in there, a couple of frames, depending on the space you can drop in there. So you wait about 10 days and you come back. This is the problem with trap house, you keep coming back. So you come back and you check, and now you've got queen cells in there, you got lots of bees in there. So you pull that nook out of the way, you put another nook there, and do the same thing again. And if it's a new hive, and it's only been there for a couple of weeks, maybe once or twice is all you need to do. And a lot of times when it's a brand new hive, the old queen will come out. But most of the time what happens, the hive's got plenty of stores, it's got lots of honey in there, it's got lots of unhatched brood, and so the nurse bees hang out in there, and as those bees hatch, they become nurse bees. Those nurse bees go out and become foragers, can't get back in, and there's plenty of honey, so the queen keeps laying. So that hive will continue to produce bees for as long as there's food in there. So we've had a few that went as long as 3 or 4 months. The majority of them usually go 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And at that time, usually you come back and there's no more bees on the outside, and maybe even your nook is not really full of bees anymore. And that's the point where you can take this thing away. If you do that, you almost sure have gotten most of the stores out of the wall, which is the biggest complaint of doing anything not removing the wall. So you got the brood out, there's not going to be anything in there rotting, and they've used up the honey, so there's nothing that's going to attract ants or roaches or silverfish. The only thing that's going to be there is some wax, and that's not very tasty for any except some wax, but you might get some wax. So at that time, we close the hole up and collect your money and go about your business. We usually don't do trap outs that are not close to the house. And the reason for that is because I'm going to figure somewhere between 4 and 6 visits. And if I have to drive 30 miles 6 times, I'm going to have to charge more. All right? So the last thing, any questions on trap outs, or do you want to put in? Last thing is what they call a forced abscond. And if you go on any of the bee sites, especially for some reason the local beekeepers, they call removing cutouts, or they call forced absconds trap outs, and that's just not it. A forced abscond is something you do to make the bees leave for today. The problem with forced abscond is it leaves everything that the bees have put in that container, whether it's a wall or a statue or whatever, it's still in there. So once you get the bees out, 6 months from now, you're going to get called back because there's honey moving out from under the edge of the wall, and it smells bad, and they got roaches, and they got silverfish, and they got flies. So we won't do a forced abscond in a building where people live or work, simply because no matter what you tell somebody, in 6 months they've forgotten, and it's all your fault. So if you're going to do a forced abscond, I would have something in writing, and even then it doesn't always work. Last year, I guess it was last year, maybe my time was the Department of Agriculture put out a notice that they were going to stop beekeepers from doing cutouts. And the reason they were doing that was because of people where they did not do cutouts, where they left products in the hive in the walls, and then the customers complained. Well, it turns out it wasn't the beekeepers so much, it was the pest control operators, because they come through and they dust the holes, They kill the bees, they may even plug the hole up, which they're supposed to, but they don't do anything else. So now, 6 months later, now it's rotting and smelling. So anyway, the Florida State beekeepers and several of us went up and argued. And as far as I know, the motion was tabled. I don't think anything's ever happened. Have you heard anything? Still. So hopefully it'll never go through. I have a feeling a lot of it was the pest control operators feeling that we were cutting into their business. So anyway, let's talk about forced abscondment. Usually forced abscondment, most places I see it in trees, or sometimes statues, or things that, like I did a gas tank, where they didn't want to tear the tank open, and they wanted the bees out. Basically with a forced abscondment, the first thing you got to do is figure out where the bees are coming and going. And you want the highest, if they got more than one entrance, you want to leave the highest entrance, because that's where smoke rises. That's where the smells rise. So then you got to find a way at the bottom of the hive, which if you're talking about a tree, usually you can go around and tap on with a wrench or something. You can say, hear the hollow sound, and then you can take a drill and drill a hole. If you go into a hollow and you get debris or honey, and you know that you're in the right spot. So with a forced abscondment, what you do now is you get your ladder set up so that you're up by the entrance, and you get a box set up there with some foam in it, and then you start at the bottom. And you can either use smoke, or you can use one of the obnoxious chemicals they use to drive bees out of a hive when they're trying to harvest the honey, like Ego or some of those. If you use anything like Ego or any of those, if you actually get them on the bees, it tends to kill them. We found that out the hard way. So we prefer smoke. But what you do is you don't want to make so much smoke that you choke the bees to death. What you want to do is use the smoke to make a movement. So you stick the end of the smoker in there with maybe 1, 2, 3 puffs. You wait. You see the smoke curl out of the top of the entrance. And you wait a few minutes and you'll see some bees come out. You do it again. And maybe every 8 or 10, 15 minutes is depending on how much patience you have. You do another puff. And eventually what's going to happen is all the bees are going to abandon the brood and the comb, and they're going to move to the top so they can breathe, and they'll start coming out the hole. Now the guy standing up on the ladder, that's his job, is to find the queen. So as soon as you spot the queen, you take the queen catcher or your air fingers, whatever you want to do, you get her in that box with the comb. Usually as quick as you get her in the box, you'll start having other bees move in. And so if you have several frames in there, there's plenty of places for the bees to stand. If you have a frame or two of brood in there, it's even better because the bees are attracted to it. Basically, when you quit getting bees coming out of the hole, close the box up, put it in the truck, collect your money, tell the homeowner to close his tree up and cut his tree down over the next 2 weeks. And that's pretty much a forced abscondment. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I'm curious about your liability when you're doing back office, especially. What do you pay for insurance?
We don't. A lot of people, we've done this for about 9 years, and we are always very careful to judge our customers and to explain things 15 times. And we've never had a problem. We probably should have insurance. I think Nancy told me when I talked to her, she was paying about $600 a year as a rider for the bees. Like I said, we just never experienced a problem. We've got to the point now where we're really not doing much anymore because of everything that we have to move. I've got a kid that's an exterminator that's learning the bees, and he's desperately high on my vacuum process trying to get that to do the job. But he gets the bees out, he gives me the bees, he collects the bees from the homeowner, and we're both happy. Another question? So someone else raise their hand. Okay. Okay. That's pretty much it. Yes, sir. Right, put it across the door, or put it underneath the box. Right, we've done that. Okay, the question is, have you done anything using queen excluder to keep the queen in the box so that she doesn't leave and swarm? And I have seen a lot of people do that. We've done it a few times. Basically, you take the queen excluder, instead of putting it above the box, you put it under the box so that it blocks the bee. The queen can't get out of the door. Or I've even seen people cut pieces of queen excluder off and put it across the whole units. We've done it a few times, but we found that we just put brood in there, that we have just about as much success. We don't usually have the stress of doing more stuff. Another question? Yes, it's all right. We have boxes we use for cutouts and stuff. Repeat the question. Okay, sorry. Yeah, you want to know what we do to close the box. We have these twirly doors on some of our boxes, and I built bottom boards that have no entrance. So we have twirly doors sitting on software, three bottom board, and you can set this entrance for wide open so everybody can let it out. You can set it where only workers can go out, basically a green scooter. Or you can set it where it's just ventilation where the air goes through and nobody. So those work really well. We usually use that and ratchet strap. The ratchet strap everything together and goes in the back seat and air conditioner. By the way, if you need to transport bees, and I'll tell you, we've transported 2 weeks in the back of the truck. And this drone stepped out in front of us. And I slammed the brakes on it. I mean, everything in the truck went flying. So one of the nooks came off and hit the back of the seat, and the ratchet strap twisted. So suddenly we have a lot of bees. Maybe 1,000 bees flying around the truck. Never got stung once. Once you get in the vehicle, and I think they tell you too, Becky, if you're attacked by bees in the vehicle, they didn't close the door. All of a sudden, things are open the door. Bees aren't interested. The bees go to the windows, and that's where they just hang out. So this went over, came apart, the frames on the floor, and every bee in the clip was out flying around. All they do is fly to the windows. I had a few walk in my ears and walk in my hair. I refrained from slapping anybody. And I was very careful when I put my hand or put my elbow up for it to make sure I didn't have a bee there before I sat down. But we got back to the apiary. We got out of the truck. We set the nook right side up. Frames back in it. Took a bottle of water and set up in the tree for about 15 minutes. Came back and about 99% of the bees were back in the nook. Down to the end of the apiary and set it up and do it. We do bee class. We teach bee people at USF, and like this last weekend was the weekend that everybody picked up the nooks. So there 72 nooks were there. And these people always want to put them in the trunk or put them in the bed of the truck. And this wasn't a bad thinking because it was pretty cool. But normally we'll tell them you cannot put it in the trunk. You can't put it in the bed, or in the back seat. If they're anything like us, the first year we did it, we wore a veil until we got up on the interstate. Idiots. So since then we don't bother. But it's always interesting to new beekeepers to watch them. It's amazing. And the next time you see it, they got bees walking in their hair and in their hair. It's amazing the change. Anything else?
Like I said, we will be attempting a cutout Saturday in the bee yard. We have one of them cardboard swarm traps that the bees have moved into, so we will do a removal and put it into a box. So it'll be like doing a cutout on a wall like we talked about. So if you're interested in something like that, or that's something you're looking forward to doing, come on out and watch me do one up before you do. Yeah, there's home built this one. Don't know how many weeks it's been there. I noticed it about a week ago, so there's 3 or 4 good pieces of cone in there, so. It is newer. I will tell you that, like he said, when you get into a wall, people go, oh, I just noticed them, they haven't been there long, and you open up the wall, there's a 4x4 panel where they are, and some of the cones as black as his t-shirt.